the chat and it can get a little difficult to keep up. So that would be great. Thank you.
No worries. Sorry, I think that we have started already, so people will start joining at any point. Maybe we can, if you want to take like 5 or something before, you can just turn your camera off and I'll get everyone ready and hyped up.
I'm going to shoot Mario a message real quick. Just a little reminder.
No worries.
Just
We still have 10 minutes before we start, but
Oh, well, I'm hopped up. I really liked your story, Promises, Promises, Mario.
Mario's in the group. I don't see him.
That's not Mario? Who's
No.
Are you not
okay.
Mario?
I am not
No.
Mario. I should change my
He's helping.
here.
Yeah, all right. They're the ones that are hosting it. Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry.
No worries at all.
That's okay. The names are so small to see anyways, but let me send him a message real quick to
No worries. We still have 8 minutes for the 5 attendees in
I was wondering who
the
you
room
were. I
is
thought you were
ready.
Mario. I was like, whoa.
No. But we still have time. And for the 6 attendees in the room, don't worry, we haven't started yet. We're just getting everyone in the panel ready. And in 7 minutes, well, around 7 minutes, I'll start with some housekeeping. But in the meantime, if you want to start sharing where you are joining us from, so we can
There's Mario.
start to.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Hello, Mario.
Hey,
Nice to meet you.
good to meet you also.
Thank you.
Oh, hello from the Netherlands. That's cool.
Hello,
Oh, who's,
Arthur. Sorry.
oh, I was gonna say, who's from the Netherlands?
So Arthur
Somebody.
from the audience.
Oh,
And we have Edwin from California. And I'll start sharing some useful links. And I will explain in a minute what these links mean. 1 second. Yeah, we just hit the starting button slightly before time, but we haven't really started yet. So we're just letting everyone join and just asking people to introduce themselves in the meantime. So if you want to take a minute or two, get some water, don't worry, we won't start before the allocated time. So feel free to.
Mario.
yeah.
I really liked Promises, Promises.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I know that. I'm glad for the addition that you put in there also. I thought it was a nice touch to it.
Well, I don't even remember doing that, but you're welcome. But I mean, I really liked the story. It was, I thought it was very well written. It was engaging. A lot of times we lead off Roadkill with strong stories, and we just happen to have, actually, all three of you guys have lead off stories in a Roadkill volume. I think The Teeth was in one. I know A Real Haunting, or maybe 30 Seconds, plus 30 Seconds, Madison. So you guys have all had really strong stories and stories to lead off an anthology with. Well, in Brett and I's opinion, well, in Madison's opinion too, and it's sort of exciting. pretty impressive stuff.
No, thanks. I always enjoy the opportunity to be a part of the anthology. I mean, it's you guys have been a central place for a lot of my work for a number of years now.
2017,
Yeah,
volume 2.
yeah, all the way back then.
Yeah, and I think Jackie was in that too, or Jacqueline.
As well. Yeah.
And it's kept it strong. I mean, now it's kind of like maybe not a heavyweight, but a weighty literary venue here in Texas. And before everybody comes on, I should tell you I'm going to edit volume 10, and Joe Lansdale's story, Tight Little Stitches in a Dead Man's Back, is going to appear in it, which I've always been a huge fan of.
Fantastic.
Oh yeah, that's awesome.
That is awesome.
So I'll probably grab maybe some more Robert E. Howard or somebody, but we'll see.
Oh, I got to
Sounds
tell you that when I saw that one of my stories was in there with a Robert E. Howard's, I mean, I almost swooned. I mean, that's
Well, don't
I
forget O.
rarely
Henry
do
was in that too.
huh?
O. Henry was in that one too.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've been a huge fan of his work since I was a little kid. I went to the 50th Howard Day celebration a few
And
years
Cross
ago.
Plains?
Yeah, oh, I made the journey all the way up there.
Oh wow, I've been by there.
And-
I dig it.
Funny enough, the restaurant in Promises is loosely based off of Gene's Feed Barn in Brownwood, Texas. So,
Well, I always wind up stopping at that dumb buffet place in Brownwood. I can never remember the name, but I'm a sucker for it. But I should try what you just mentioned when I go through there sometime. I need to visit Laredo. I was telling, I guess Emilio earlier, because I thought he was you, that I need to visit Laredo. I've wanted to for a while. Just haven't got
I
around to
mean,
it.
the downtown area is real nice. The surrounding areas with all the ranch land and stuff like that. I mean, there's plenty to see around here. But yeah, I know that we have a great art museum in the center of downtown, and yeah, it'd be great.
Isn't that where Jovita Idar's from, or where they rent?
That is, yeah, that is where she's from. I want to say that the original offices where she had that newspaper and stuff like that should still be around somewhere. But I know a lot of students at the local university have done projects where they've kind of like outlined Jovita Idar's contributions to journalism and women's rights and stuff like that.
Oh, she was a heavyweight. I wrote about her in Telltale, Texas. I've been a big fan for a while.
Oh, nice.
So where are we at, Emilio?
Good question. So I will start sharing my screen because we have some.
Madison, what are we talking about?
We have first just 5 minutes. Sorry, Madison. You
I
were
was just
gonna
gonna say, yeah, the panel is contemporary horror, so it's gonna be a little bit of some talking about a little bit about censorship and a little bit about your own writing. So like how you try to keep your ideas fresh, some techniques that you might recommend. I'm gonna try to keep it limited to about 30 minutes so that there's plenty of time for audience questions too, because I did my best to pick questions that I'm both interested in and that I think would be the most beneficial to the audience. But you also want to give time for the audience to
Be
ask
right
their more
back.
specific questions. So, Emilio, you're muted.
Sorry. I was saying, well, thank you so much, Madison, and I'm really, really excited. And I will start with some housekeeping first, and then I'll give the room to the four of you. So first of all, hello everyone. I'm Emilio from Writing Aid, and thank you so much for joining us today. If you can see and hear me, please drop your name and location in the chat. And we'll start now with some housekeeping items. So first of all, you can access all the replays for the Horror Writers Fest by going to our hub. You will find the replays once, or we will add the replays to the hub page once they have been processed by Zoom and YouTube. So this can take a few hours. They will be added as soon as possible. So don't worry if you don't see a specific replay that you want to see. We will add it as soon as we can, and we will also be posting all of our replays to our community page, which should be in the chat, and I'll share it again in a second by November the 1st. And you will all also see previous replays from previous writers weeks, and the community page is free for everyone to join, so go and join if you haven't yet. Yeah, so there's a special offer for all the all Horror Writers Fest participants. You will receive early access to our upcoming Black Friday sale, and this will get you 50% of Premium and Premium Pro plans for both yearly and lifetime. You will receive an email just by signing up to the Horror Writers Fest. You will receive an email with more information closer to the sale. But if you haven't received anything, please send us an email to hello@prowritingit.com if you haven't received anything by November the 16th, and we'll be happy to help. If you want to keep the horror conversation going, we'd love to have you in our online writing community. Joining is really easy. Just visit the link, which we'll share as well in the chat in a second, and log in with your Pro account info. You can also hop over to the live event chat to talk to other attendees. We'll also love if you could share your feedback on Horror Writers Fest in the Typeform survey that we will link as well in the chat, and that it's linked in the hub as well. We love hosting events like these, and your feedback is really, really important for us to plan these events in the future. Tell us everything, what you loved, what you think we could improve on, and what you would like to see in a future event as well. We also have a fun new writing challenge coming up called 5K in 5 days, where participants in our community will write 5,000 words or more between November the 4th and the 8th. We'll have daily teachings, writing prompts, discussion forums, and even live writings that you can take part in. It's free to sign up, and we'd love to see you there. We'll also share the sign up link in the chat and on the hub. So a few reminders for this session. If you have any questions for our speakers, please use the Q&A box. You will find it at the center of your Zoom screen. If you'd like to chat to other viewers, please use the chat and select everyone in the drop-down menu so your messages are visible to all viewers. Otherwise, they will be only visible to us, the host and panelists. And yeah, special links. So we will share some links regarding our offers, our community, and also how to contact all or how to get in touch with all of our panelists in the chat as well. And yeah, with that being said, I will give a pass to Madison to introduce all our panelists. But first, let me introduce Madison. So Madison Estes writes horror and dark fantasy. Her short story Pestilence made the Bram Stoker Recommended Reading list and her mother's official note list. Her work often revolves around villainous protagonists or heroines struggling with bizarre moral dilemmas. She's the editor of Roadkill, Texas Horror by Texas Writers, Volume 6. She has taught horror writing courses at the Writing Barn and the Durham Writing Group. Madison also runs a hybrid authortube HorrorTube channel, where she posts writing advice videos, writing blogs, and horror reviews. And yeah, thank you, Madison, for being here. It's great to have you again. And yeah, thank you as well for hosting this panel.
Thank you. Thank you guys for setting this up. I really appreciate it. And I'm really looking forward to getting this started and asking all these questions about contemporary horror writing. And thank you for that introduction, Emilio. Today we have with us E.R. Bills, the co-creator of the Roadkill series that all of the panelists have been published in multiple times, I believe. And I myself am the editor of Roadkill Volume 6, where I had the privilege to publish stories by Jackie and Mario, which, Jackie's story, The Teeth, is one of the most chilling to this day body horror stories that I've ever read. Mario's story, The Chickens That Are Not Her Chickens, which is also the name of his new short story collection, I believe, that just came out. Congratulations. Is also one of my favorites from that collection. And of course, again, E.R. Bills, the man that started this whole very successful and well-known and highly regarded series, has written so many of my favorite stories, although I have to recommend Recumbent Female Nude, which is featured in Pendulum Grin. And I believe it's also been republished in your new short story collection as well, right?
Right, The Halloween in Me.
Yes, one of the most horrific but powerful and moving stories I've ever read. So
Thank you.
you guys are in for a treat because you have three incredibly talented and well-regarded authors in this panel. And I'm going to give y'all an opportunity to introduce yourselves a little bit more. And if you want to go ahead and plug whatever new publications you have coming out or that have just been released that you're excited about. And then I'll get into some of my questions. E.R. Bills, would you like to start?
I guess so. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, obviously RK9 just was released, and we're all excited about that. It's got a lot of great stories in it. There'll be a review in Fort Worth Weekly today. And I've got, obviously a lot of stuff out there, nonfiction and fiction. So I'll just talk about, the future. Obviously, we're going to do an RK10. And in this case, I'm going to edit that one. And then James Longmore and I, you guys know him, the face of Hellbound. We're going to do, I don't know what we're going to call it. Maybe I'll talk to you about that, Madison. Maybe a Roadkill best of Roadkill, or Roadkillers, best of Roadkillers. And we're going to do like a collection of the best stories to appear in Roadkill over the first 10 volumes. And so I figured that we would consult the editors, of which you are one, and then of course Patrick C. Harrison and Brett and William Jensen. I thought it would be fun, and James thinks it's a great idea. So it's probably a done deal next year that we'll have a volume 10, a standalone volume 10, and then sometime after that we'll have a best of with a title to be named. And it's very exciting. And I'm sure I'm going to see all three of you guys in one or both.
Thank you. And oh my gosh, I'm really excited. It's funny. I was just thinking a few days ago that there's been so many issues and so many stories now. There really ought to be a best of. So this is really exciting to hear. Yeah, that's so exciting. Jackie, would you like to go next?
Sure. I'm Jackie. My pen name is Jacqueline Baker. I've been in Roadkill volumes 2, 3, 6, and 7. I think I still hold the record for the most volumes, but I could be wrong. I don't know. You would have to check me on that.
I don't know, how many is that? Is that 4 volumes?
4. So
Okay, Madison's done 5.
Madison.
Mario might be right at 4, so you guys are all up there.
Yeah, we're veterans of it.
Yeah, you guys are.
I would like to maybe put something in for 10. We'll see. I'm excited for it. I knew it was going to be the 10th anniversary coming up. So, but other than that, I do have a story coming out in a collection next year that will be called The Day the Earth Almost Abruptly Ended. So it's a little bit of a spoof. It's paying homage to retro, like 1950s drive-in movie type sci-fi horror stories. So that was a little different for me. That was a fun writing project. And yeah, you can find me on Instagram. I'm really not on social media much, but I am there. Yeah, happy to be here.
All right, thank you. And Mario, would you like to introduce yourself, talk about any current projects?
Oh, sure. My name's Mario E. Martinez. As we've been saying, I was trying to figure out how many volumes of Roadkill I'd been in myself, apparently 4 of them. And so, this anthology's been a real nice feature of my work. Just recently, as Madison mentioned, I came out with a short story collection called The Chickens That Are Not Our Chickens. So basically, it's the titular story is one that came out in Roadkill. The cool thing about that one is not just is it a collection of my stories, but I got a really great illustrator to put, an illustration per story, a guy named Jorge Javier Lopez that, I mean, just deranged sketches that just fit my style so perfectly. Other than that, I mean, the last thing that came out publication-wise was, the latest volume of Roadkill and my story Promises. Um, Beyond those things, I'm regularly featured on Chilling Tales for Dark Nights, a podcast on YouTube that does like audio versions of stories. So think like those old radio plays and stuff like that of some of the stories that, I've written. So it was a lot of fun. A lot of the stories that you find in that collection, you'll see there as well. But yeah, otherwise, I mean, always writing, always working on something. So let's see what I come out with next year.
All right, yeah, and we're all looking forward to that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started with some questions. I'm going to get started with just talking about horror writing in general before we get into a little bit more specific on what techniques y'all use. Now, my first question is, what fears do you think resonate the most with today's audiences? And, how can writers effectively tap into them?
I think.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Do we need
Go
to
ahead.
like raise our hand or anything? Is it like class?
I was thinking it was more conversational, but if we end up
Okay.
talking over each other, we can do hand raising. Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine.
Well, I was just going to start off saying, I think in the age of information, to tap into the most primal human fear, which is fear of the unknown, is harder than ever. People aren't afraid of thunderstorms anymore, right? we know a lot. I think, a lot of horror centers around things that are out of our control. It's maybe things that are supernatural or things that are on such a wide scale that you don't have any hope as a single person trying to survive it. Yeah, it's I don't know. I think, things that are out of our control is kind of the best way to grip readers and scare the pants off of them.
I think
Yeah,
it's existential terror for me. I mean, I don't know. In this volume of in volume 9 of Roadkill, there's a story by Amy Trask called Internal Rhyme, and I think on an everyday basis, Americans, Texans, people in general around the world experience existential terror. The future. What can we do? Can anything be done? In the meantime, you have a circle of acquaintances or friends or loved ones around you, and what they're up to, and what they're aware and not aware of, and how you fit in their lives, and what boundaries there are, and how scary it is to try to breach something really profound with even people you love. It's a strange time we're living in. And the lyrics to songs and the text of horror stories, I think it's become a little more complex because it's hard to inhabit that space honestly and profoundly. And if you've got a readership that'll follow you down one of those trails, then I think you've really got something. I don't go in as much for the as Jackie was talking about the thunderstorms. I mean, the old tropes. They're still fun, but I don't think they resonate like some of the new stuff, like Teeth or like Madison Pestilence. Oh my gosh. There's stuff that you're like, you read it and you cringe, and it's not because, the mummy's hand is stuck out from around the corner. It's because it's happening all around you. People that or people that inhabit the communities you live in, what they're going through. So it's often a subject that's hard to breach, and I think horror is a way to really tackle it.
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
me. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Matt.
Oh, it's just me. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that I kind of have an opposite approach when it comes to what I write about and how I do it. I take Cormac McCarthy's old advice that a story has to deal with life and death. Otherwise, it doesn't hit the same way. But I've always looked at horror as almost something like timeless. One way I could guess to describe the way that I approach it is it's very naturalistic, even though things can be taken in a modern context. I think of like Promises, where really at the end of the day, it's the animal nature of wanting to live. That despite the philosophical points of view someone can have, well, no, we're animals and we want to survive. I think isolation is another thing that, even though we feel that we don't have isolation in the current climate because we're connected to everybody, even now we're not in the same space yet we're here together, there is still an isolating element that I think really does resonate with people. And then also one that I think maybe, goes all the way back to Orwell in 1984, or back to the old, days when we were being hunted in the jungles, to be constantly watched, to feel as though something is around that is unexplainable, that we don't know what it is, what its motivations toward us are. I've always thought that's kind of a great place to start, because even those themes, you can put them in a story of the 1750s or in 3055, and you still kind of have those elements are still always going to resonate. At least that's the way I've always kind of seen it.
And you did that. You took Shakespeare and flipped it on its head. Romeo and Juliet, and it was fascinating to me. And
no, thank you.
It's sort of timeless, and then you brought back some real serious gravitas in the end. It was impressive.
Again, thank you very much. Again, just with that story in particular, I really tried to highlight the fun little idiosyncrasies of life and the things that bring us joy, even if, like, let's say, I told you earlier that the restaurant is based off of a restaurant in Cross Plains, Texas. The scene with the fly not moving with people, that was a real life thing that happened, to happen to me. But again, even that little joy of a story, I think, is part of like the color of life, and really deserve to be kind of in there. I mean, again, for those that haven't read the story, I invite you to.
Yeah, absolutely great answer. And I agree. Sometimes it's the unknown that is the most frightening thing you can possibly think of. Yeah, great answers, guys. Thank you. So moving on to the next question, a little bit similar. In a world with all of this really great horror content that's constantly being churned out, both movies and books, what unique approaches do you think that writers can take to stand out and scare their audience? And if you want to get more specific, what approaches do you take to scare your audiences?
Can I jump in on that one?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Please.
Actually, I think there is a lot of horror being cranked out, and I think very little of it is very original. I mean,
Yeah.
I find it a beatdown. I hate to be a buzzkill Don't jump on me, Mario. But so if you're editing anthology, as you well know, Madison, that's what really jumps out at you is that if somebody has a voice. A lot of people are writing horror, I think, to write horror, but I'm not sure they have a voice, at least not a voice that's original. You know, we tend to fall back to the sort of the laurels of the established tropes. And so when a Pestilence pops up, or the Teeth story by Jackie, or even Those Chickens Are Not My Chickens, or Her Chickens, whatever, that story knocked me for a loop. It really kind of came from nowhere, and I didn't know. A lot of times you'll start reading a story and you know where it's going, and you know even what the monster is going to be, and it's so much like so much that's been written before. It's kind of like, okay, it's a ride. But every once in a while you get a story that takes you into a cavern that you haven't explored within yourself, or maybe you didn't even know existed. It's sort of outside your experience. Sometimes it's neat to be scared by the familiar, like plus 30 seconds. A microwave? Why'd you do that to me? But a lot of times it's the fresh approach. And I think that becomes harder and harder to do. And if you aren't reading, that's the other thing I would say for any, if I had advice to a writer, read everything, read a lot. A lot of writers that it doesn't seem like they're very well read, and the depth of their perception of sort of the art form even is not that established, and they're not even sure what's been done. But there are some people you can tell, obviously they have a grip on sort of the history and the plot lines and the worlds that have been explored. And they either riff off that in an original way, or they go after something larger. And that would be my advice. You can take that old clay and maybe breathe new life into it, but you've really got to have a catch, and you've really got to have a fresh vision. And that would be my recommendation. I mean, and you guys have all done it. I mean, what was your experience like? I mean, I can't imagine writing Pestilence. You know, I had this art teacher in college, and he was pretty established, talented guy, and I was an art major, and one day he stood next to this painting. He said, "I think this is a masterpiece." And we're all like, "What is he talking about?" It was some bozo's painting. And he said, "There's nothing I could do to improve it." Well, you guys have all, to a person, written a story that I thought, whoa, first of all, I couldn't write that. I never would have thought of that. And there's really nothing or not much I could have done to improve it. And so writing is not necessarily, you know, a process where you run in a pack. You need to really kind of get out there, I think, to grab an audience's attention. And the intimacy and shock of actually the Teeth and Pestilence really grabbed me. And the chickens aren't my chickens, or her chickens. I'm sorry, Mario.
No worry. Everyone messes up that title.
I was like, I'm glad it's the title of your collection, because I was like, whoa, there's something I don't even understand. I mean, there was, on some level, I was like, I'm not even sure what exactly this is about, but it's chilling. It's horrifying, because the implications of it are effective on so many different levels. There's so many ways you could go with it, and ways you could look at it. And of course, readers interpret, and they have their own version in the end. But that one, there's lots of rabbit holes to get lost down, in my opinion. And I thought it was very effective. And the Teeth, like I said, the Pestilence. There's been a ton of them over the while. Even Madison's first story, A Real Haunting, it wasn't an unfamiliar trope necessarily, but there was a sort of an authenticity about it, and a simplicity. You know, it didn't try to get extravagant, but it was like they're driving down a road and they can't find a place and they get lost, and the take on it was so original. So you can, there's obviously more than one way to skin a cat, but you have to do it with like an authentic voice. That would be my advice.
To kind of piggyback off of what ER was saying, I understand what you mean when you brought up that a lot of times when you read horror, when you watch horror, you kind of you miss something being clever, something being unique or different. You know, a lot of times, as you say, yeah, half the time you can kind of see where things are going and all of that. Um, One approach that I've always made, for better or for worse, is I want to try to write a story that if I read it as just, you know, someone picking it up, I would be impressed by it. That I would look at it and think that there was something there that I don't see constantly. And actually, I saw someone in chat mention The Substance. I mean, if you haven't seen that film, that's a wonderful example of it. At in the theater watching it, I said, this is what I'm talking about. This is the kind of thing that is missing. It's bizarre, it's strange, it's bold, it's doing what it pleases. You know, how many people walked out of the theater I was in, I could not tell you, but that's, to me, that's the main thing of making art, doing something boldly that part of it does come from a dissatisfaction of what's around. I often joke that I would love to just be a reader and consume things. I mean, that would be so great. But every time I read something that maybe didn't go the way I wanted it to, I'm filled with that nagging feeling that, like, I could have done something with this. I could have altered it. I could have given it another aspect. And that more often than not keeps me not only going back to the page, but really kind of demanding myself, you know, don't fall into something that is normal. One of the things that, you know, I love to write about are werewolves. And you all know every werewolf story is the same. It's, oh God, someone gets attacked. What's happening? Now they got to be killed by their family or something. And so that was almost my rule with werewolf stories. Like, that will not be how it goes. It cannot follow that pattern. If it does, don't even bother with it. And so I think it was the first cup that we were talking about came out with in one of your anthologies, that I was so proud that that one was published, because it was a werewolf story and I love them so much, but it wasn't like one that you see. And that to
You
me
didn't
was
see it coming. You didn't see it coming. Have you read the
Yeah.
Mongrels by have you read Mongrels by also Roadkill contributor Stephen Graham Jones?
Funny enough, I have a copy of that book within reach of me right now.
That one I thought was
have-
very impressive.
Mhm.
Also,
Yeah. I'll just add to what y'all were saying. You know, it is a matter of finding a fresh take on something that has been around for, I mean, since the dawn of horror, like werewolves. You know, finding a unique take on it. You know, maybe it's the classic werewolf story, but maybe you put it in a setting like, you know, the moon or something. And how can you play with that? How can you make that different? What scenarios can you use to change it up? And then my other piece of advice is maybe a strange one, but think about it a lot. I think about teeth all the time.
I believe it.
I got a very scary story out of my mind, just wondering about, you know, teeth one day. So, you know, whatever it is you want to write about, spend the time with it. Really sit there and think about what could happen and go down that rabbit hole. It might be a very bizarre rabbit hole, but there are people that want to read that. So go for it.
you also
Yeah.
did the same thing Madison did effectively in Southern Hospitality. Do you remember that story?
Unexpected, yeah.
Yeah, I was like, whoa.
Everybody
I mean,
thinks
it's
so.
like they're driving. It's a road trip story, and I was like,
Yeah.
wow. You know,
Everybody
so yeah,
Yeah, hillbilly cannibals for that one, but it's not.
sure.
That's
I
great
remember
advice.
Brett. Sorry, I
ahead.
remember Brett famously when we did Roadkill 1. Brett McCormick, the indie horror filmmaker that I met at the North Texas Book Festival. When we started to edit that, we put it together pretty fast, and I was friends with Joe R. Lansdale, so he gave us the story right off the bat, so we knew we had something, if nothing else. But I remember he said, I don't want any zombie stories, and I don't want any vampire stories or any Wolfman stories, because it's already been done. They do it over and over and over. But you know what? In the end, I think one vampire story and a werewolf story both appeared in Roadkill 1 because they were original. They were so original. It's funny.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think a werewolf story appeared in the anthology I edited too. So he definitely is something that you can do over and over again if you play with it right. And I loved
Yeah.
your idea, Jackie, werewolves on the moon. That's because do they ever get to transform back? I mean, I don't know. That's
Do they?
I don't know.
Jot that down. Think about it. See what
Maybe that could be fun. That could be really fun. And Mario, the don't fall into something normal. I think I want to write that down and get it framed in my office. I think that's a great motto for any horror writer. That is excellent advice. Um, thank you guys. Those were great answers all around. Thank you. Okay. So last question, or not last question, I have a couple more. This question is because censorship is huge right now. There's a lot of talk about book banning. I went to go vote the other day and I saw signs about don't write sexual books, our children are reading them. And I was like, oh my God. And so, yeah, and it's not just, with books, it's everywhere, but especially with horror writing. So I wanted to ask you guys, what effect do you think censorship has on the creativity of horror writers? And what advice would you give to someone that wants to write horror, but maybe is a little bit afraid because of censorship?
I would ignore any of the, if you don't mind me jumping in, I would ignore any of the instructions of what not to write, and I would ignore the censors as well. I mean, it's it's asinine, it's inane, it's un-American. Everything you say about it. Some of my books are basically on those lists, my nonfiction books, but some of my horror also sort of treads the same territory, and it's just not going to work. I mean, it's a great political football to kick around, but even though sometimes I think a large part of the populace is asentient, um, there are still people that are paying attention, and there are still people that want to know things, and the readership is there. And I think actually it'll have the opposite effect. I mean, you push the pendulum. It's certainly not swinging of its own accord, but you push it this way too far, eventually it swings back. And even if your story maybe doesn't resonate immediately or with a big enough crowd eventually it will. And so I take it as a challenge. Albert Camus, Nobel Prize winner, 1957 literature, said, in dangerous times, artists create dangerously. Now, I don't know if writing stuff that's going to be censored is necessarily you taking on or risking danger, but it's a process that's similar. You should say, no, this is what I think, this is what I'm going to do, and this is how it went. And I've ignored that from the beginning, and I think a lot of writers have. Stephen King has his whole career, really. I mean, even if you go back to The Dead Zone, he was talking about speaking out against Vietnam in that book, and even in recent years, he's obviously very political in the background, and so is Joe R. Lansdale, sort of our Stephen King here in Texas. And I just horror as a genre, people kind of look down their nose at it for a long time in terms of film and things, but you go back and you read Shirley Jackson's The Lottery, or any number of works, and it's part of the conversation. It's part of what you can explore. The Thing from Outer Space was a discussion of McCarthyism, communism. We have our sort of role in cleaning this ridiculousness up. And I don't think you could just sit back and, no offense, write vampire stories or werewolf stories or ghost stories without addressing the horror that's occurring in our society right now. That's just my opinion. I think it's irresponsible if you do. And I think it's a betrayal of your craft. You have to take on contemporary injustice, or you're irrelevant.
Yeah. I think horror in particular as a genre is very important in pushing back against things like that, because the things that you're avoiding the most are the things that you need to confront the most. And, horror stories are you know, kind of a safe environment to do that in. You know, even if you do scare yourself with them, but yeah, it's important to not let people tell you what to write.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
No, agreed. I think that when it comes to the idea of censorship and should people listen to them, I mean, maybe it's the punk rock background I had when I was young. Who cares what they have to say? Frankly, the people that tell you you need to censor their work, you show me how big their library is. I don't think it's very big. Most of the people complain they don't read. And so the other thing is that even though I get it that horror is a very big tent and it can be kind of schlocky and sometimes it can be kind of goofy and it can be kind of funny. I was just talking to a class, I mean, about an hour ago, that horror shows you what is terrifying to people of a culture, to terrifying to people of a time. And even though you can use a monster, it can symbolize something different that does have a larger impact. I think in one of the novels that I've written, Ash Tree, which is the premise is a drugged out rodeo clown going to the town of Ash Tree and wondering why he keeps hallucinating horrible things. I mean, one side of it is that it's a strange story, but the other one is that this is about trying to recreate the past and bring it out of the dustpan of history, and how that really just creates chaos and discord versus just the natural progression of life. But is it kind of a monster story? Yeah, I mean, I thought that was cool, and I was inspired a lot by things like Silent Hill and what was that story by H.P. Lovecraft, Innsmouth, I believe it was. Those things sure kind of guided me a little bit, but at the end of the day, if you take enough steps back, it is art. It doesn't matter if it's using something that has become cartoonish. You can talk about so many things. I mean, speaking of Stephen King, The Shining is just a man dealing with alcoholism and not wanting to recreate the sins of his past, yet inevitably will fall into it. Now, is it just a haunted house story? I mean, on one hand, sure, but the other hand, no, it's very much deeper. And I think that that's one of the things that you always have to remind yourself when you're writing. You are making art, and sometimes it's just art for art's sake, but other times it will have a deeper resonance. And so you have to kind of treat it with that reverence and that kind of outright disdain for what other people say about the, well, it's maybe too shocking, maybe the theme is too dark, maybe people won't like it. Hey, that's kind of not my problem. That's theirs. I'm gonna write as I see fit. You know, that's always been. I mean, that's always been my approach to it. That if they don't like it, they were never gonna like it to begin with. So,
Holiday in Cambodia.
agreed.
Yeah, great answers. And, you know, I agree completely. In fact, it's kind of funny. In a lot of online forums, I see mostly Facebook, but I'm friends with a lot of horror writers on Facebook. Sometimes it can actually be like a badge of pride to have stories that have gotten 1-star reviews or even whole collections. And people saying this was terrible, it was awful, this is, you know, some of the worst things, this person has a demented mind. Once they start criticizing you as a person, it's like, all right, I got them. So that's another way to maybe look at it, is to maybe kind of wear it as a badge of pride, if that helps. And, you know, I realized as everybody was talking, I kind of have my own experience with being a little bit afraid and trying to censor myself with that story, Pestilence. It had been rejected several times from publishers that kind of had that reaction of, this is a little too much. Or I just wouldn't get an answer at all.
Can I interject? Can I interject?
Yeah.
That is insane. That is so ridiculous. That story comes at you, fangs bared, claws, you know, out, and it's like going for your throat right off the bat. I don't understand how anybody passed on that story or how it fell to us, because I was kind of stupefied. I think we mentioned that back then, and I was like, what? Because it was timely, and it was original, and it was told from a really almost gutturally personal point of view. It was, wow, that's shocking to me. but I could see where, you know, it might rain on somebody's political football, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, and I'd kind of, since it had been rejected so many times, by the time roadkill submissions opened up, I was like, well, this is clearly one of my B stories. It's been rejected so many times. Like, this must not be that good. But I didn't have anything else at the time because I had so much stuff going on. So I just submitted it, and I was like, well,
Oh,
you know, at
thanks.
least I
Give
did.
us your second tier stuff.
I didn't
I think
have
the stuff
anything else. Yeah.
that
No,
may be
I
a
think
candidate for the best of roadkill. It's so good. That's crazy.
No, that was another case of me missing the deadline. I think I was working on the story I submitted the next year, whatever that was. Was it unfinished story? I don't remember, and I didn't finish it on time, ironically. So yeah, that was one reason. But yeah, that has ended up being my most popular story. It was the one that I was like, oh, people are gonna hate this. They're gonna think it's terrible. And even my dad was like, yeah, that one's pretty memorable. My mom did not. I told her the synopsis and she's like, I'm not reading that one. But my dad loved it. So, you know, even though I was a little worried about what he's going to think, you know, a lot of the times the fears that you might have are baseless, and you might be surprised at how much your friends like your weird stuff, or your family even. So,
You might be
okay, so
surprised at how weird your friends are. I mean, the audience, I think it resonated. Young ladies, young women. I could see, obviously, I'd be on the other end of that plot line. But young women, I thought, man, that really goes to the gist, I think, of what is probably on a lot of their minds. I don't know. I thought it was really impressive.
Thank you. And yeah, and another thing, I remember reading it out loud at the writing panel that we had at Murder by the Books, and the crowd was just full of like older ladies, and I was like, oh my God. I forgot that there's a really graphic sex scene in it that involves like a half man, half horse. I was like, I'm really gonna read this scene because I didn't think about the fact that, you know, I just didn't think about reading it out loud. I didn't even know that we were doing that. And then I looked up and they were really engaged in it. They loved it. And then afterwards they came up to me and they're like, I'm definitely going to read your story. So you just
Are you
never
kidding?
know.
Getting mounted by one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse? That is
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. So, you know, just cut yourself some slack if you're looking into writing horror for the first time and you're nervous about, you know, going too far. Don't be. You probably just haven't found your audience. Okay, so I think now we should take some questions from the audience. Oh, wow, it's a crowded room today. Thank you guys for showing up. Thank you. But yeah, if we have any questions, I think this would be a good time to start taking. I see in the Q&A. Okay. From anonymous attendee, in a recent talk, Stephen Graham Jones said that it's his job to let the bodies hit the floor as a horror writer. I'm curious how each of you handle deciding how far to take the horror and gore in your writing, and have your limits changed throughout your career. Okay. So I think we kind of addressed that.
Go ahead.
I do want to have your limits change throughout your career. Did you guys have something similar to my awakening, or have you just, I think, Bill, as you said, you've just always been, I'm going to write whatever I want to write.
I don't think gore is necessary at all. I don't think it's necessary at all. I don't think some of the scariest stuff is just heady, the implications. I mean, even today, I mean, the gore stories are for the peanut gallery, in my opinion. I mean, of course it's important, and there's going to be gore. And as Mario said, and it wasn't just Cormac McCarthy said it way after Hemingway, it's not a true story if somebody doesn't die. There's going to be gore and there's going to be people die, but the implications are just as scary sometimes as the act. You don't have to lay it out there, but stories can enjoy elements of both, or just rely on one or the other. So I think a lot of stuff I've written doesn't have a lot of gore at all. I don't know if anything I've written has gore. Does it? Do you remember anything? I don't know. I'd have to think about that real hard. I mean, people
I mean,
die.
yeah. And definitely has some very disturbing content. Again, like recumbent female nude is excellent, very disturbing. But yeah, there's not really gore in that. So I
No,
have to think about that some more.
I think you can
Yeah.
go. You can jump either way, and you can justify either, and you can compel an audience, and you can captivate an audience with gore, or with just ugly, dark truths or suggestions. And obviously, the streaming channels are mining every avenue of that. You know, they'll get heady, they'll get gory, they'll get perverted, and sometimes they'll try to, if they can't do it strong enough in one or two, they'll try to throw it all together in a mishmash. So just depends on your command. It's like, I'm not a big baseball guy, but you have to have more these days in horror. I would say body count and gore is like your fastball. You got to have a curve, you got to have a knuckle, maybe a slider. You need to have some other pitches. You need to have something else going on just to get the rider to really strike the reader. Maybe not out, but strike them in a way that, you know, compels them or gets them to think about what they've just experienced.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Definitely.
I mean, to answer the question, oh, sorry, Madison.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that to me, with gore, it always depends on the story. The story calls for certain things, and let's say promises, you know, someone gets shot in the head, and you would think, well, I could have spent 3 paragraphs talking about the spray of blood and the bits of bone and things like that, but the purpose wasn't the gore, it was everything kind of beyond that. Whereas in something like, let's say, my novel Ash Tree, it is as gory can be. I mean, I paint with vivid reds in that one because the story kind of called for it. And I've always just felt that if you do something with purpose, then even if it is like horrifyingly disgusting, it's understandable that it was done for that way. If you're just doing it because, well, it's a scary story, there should be some blood, you're putting parsley on a plate. I'm just looking at it for nothing. I'm not supposed to eat it, and then what's going on, you know?
I agree with what you said, Mario. It has a lot to do with the tone of the story, and if it's appropriate for, you know, if you have like a haunted house story, you're not going to expect people to get, you know, decapitated left and right necessarily. It's not the right atmosphere. But then you have something that is gory, and it's about that madness maybe driving the bloodshed or whatever the story might be. I mean, as far as like my limits and how far I'll go, and if that's changed, I wouldn't say it has. You know, I sort of just woke up one day and realized that I was like a horror person, because I wasn't always when I was younger. But I just woke up one day and was like, I am the scary thing. Let's explore that. So, you know, and I do, and I write. So, and I don't think I have any limits per se. There might be stuff that I'm like, well, I'm not really interested in writing about that subject, so I'm not going to write about the monster that's the metaphor for that subject. That sort of thing.
I'd be afraid to know.
Most people probably would.
I love that. I am the scary thing. You guys are just giving me all kinds of inspiration for quotes in my office now. Thank you. That is words to live by. I am the scary thing. That's great. From Alex Mack wants to know, what would be your advice on dealing with legal censorship specifically? Have any of y'all had any experiences with legal censorship?
I have. You have to. You don't tolerate it. I'm sure, Madison, you may be aware of this, but I went to appear at a Fort Worth Public Library, which is funded in part by the Texas government in some way, form, or fashion. And they had a permission. They had a contract I had to sign before I could go and talk about this book that I'd written. And this book that I've written had nothing to do really with anything terribly political. But they gave me a contract, and it was the state of Texas, 30 pages. And the last 3 pages, there were 3 articles. And they said, cannot discuss or basically disparage the firearm industry. And then it said something like, cannot discuss or disparage the energy lobby or the energy industry here in Texas or whatever. And then it also had an article on cannot discuss or disparage the state of Israel. And I thought, the book was 100 Things to Do in Texas Before You Die. It was a travel book, something, a sideline book. And I called the librarian and I said, you know what? I'm not going to sign this. And the librarian said, I wouldn't either. Any venues that require you to censor yourself, don't participate in them. Don't participate in them. I mean, there are like productions and athletic venues that are losing out because they're in places like Texas, and the freedoms here are being truncated, abridged in scary ways, and corporations aren't playing part to it, or will not be a part of it. And I get that. And as a writer, you have that freedom too. There are other venues, there are other avenues you could pursue, and I would not. I just wouldn't be a part of it. In that case, it would have been a good reading event, and it was in Fort Worth, which is close to where I live, and it would have been great to go talk about travel, but not at the sacrifice of my principles, and not at, if they're asking me to be un-American, because that's un-American, that's fascist. And I don't understand how we've gotten to that place. That doesn't matter where you're at in the world. If it's a violation of just basic, decent human principle or intellectual freedom, you can't take part in it, even if you want to sell books. That's my opinion, but I'm probably a little hardcore about it. I still know how to slam dance, Mario.
Nice. No, and I mean, to expand on that a little bit, the truth of the matter is that, yes, there may be places that want to do something like that. I mean, I think it's wild that the state of Texas would ask you to do something like that, but at the same time, I'm not all that surprised. But the good thing is that in the 21st century, crowds have gotten smaller, but that's all you need. That the way that it used to be to reach 1,000 people, yeah, you needed the state of Texas to help you so they could put you in the right spot and they could help advertise for you and all that. I mean, how many people are taking part in this horror fest from all over the country, from different parts of the world, as I'm seeing, from the chat? If you want to do something where you can read to people, to sell your book to people, there's 1,000 different ways to do it, to where you can build an audience that has nothing to do with your local governments, your local communities. And not only that, the one thing that is, the world is always changing. Young people are always the same. They're rebellious. The public library doesn't want to put your stuff. Go find somebody with bolts through their nose and colored hair. They'll gladly put you up there, because people are interested in what you have to say. It's just finding the right group. And I would say, if someone's trying to censor you, whether that is a publisher, whether it is a venue, tell them where to go. You don't need them. As it is, even with me, to get my books out to the public, I've tried selling them online. I try sending them to the traditional publishers. At the end of the day, I just do it myself, and I go sell it to people myself. I go push my own product, and I do a lot better than somebody that has to twist themselves into a pretzel because, well, hey, this is a good publisher and maybe their PR team can help me sell 10,000 copies, frankly, of a book that they didn't think much about, because they had to change so much of it to fit what somebody thinks might sell. So, yeah, I mean, shave a mohawk in my head. Don't worry about the profits. Go do, the audiences are out there. It's just a matter of finding them and not putting up with that kind of nonsense of, you're telling me I can't disparage the oil industry if I read. So I guess my next story is going to be about fracking.
I agree with y'all. I don't think you have to engage with organizations like that. It's a big wide world, and there's always other avenues and places to put your stuff out there. I left Texas, so maybe that's what you do sometimes.
No,
Yeah.
these are the trenches, baby. Gotta stay.
Keep fighting.
Gotta stay and fight.
Yeah, I think that we are just about done. But man, you guys should see the comment section. Lots of people are agreeing with y'all, and someone said, "I am for sure the scary thing." Yeah, that's a great quote. But yeah, great attitude, I think, to have towards censorship, especially regarding things like, again, like the oil company. You can't say anything bad about them. That feels very cult-like, and it's good to just stay away from people like that. Because the thing is, in general, anytime you get into some kind of financial contract with someone, you want to make sure that you moralistically agree on the same things. Because if it's difficult at the beginning, it's just going to get more difficult. So that's my addition. But great responses, everyone, both for that last question and the whole panel. You guys have been fantastic. Thank you guys so much for showing up and for participating and for having such wonderful responses.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Madison, ER, Jacqueline, and Mario. This was such a good session, and I've been following the comments, and people are so engaged. I think everyone really, really enjoyed it. So a really, really big thank you to all of you for spending your time with us, and also thanks to the audience for joining us. Yeah, we will share the replay of this session and other sessions as well in the hub. I shared the link earlier, and you'll see also links for each of our panelists. So please do check them up. And we hope you join us in the next session. We'll have a networking event, a speed dating event. So please join us, and we're happy to have you, and we hope to have you in the future. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Emilio.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
And thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you, you too.
Same
Bye-bye.
to you.